Welcome to FREMA Audiobooks, the place where your mindset grows sharper, your financial intelligence expands, and your future becomes clearer. And today you are diving into Invest Like a Genius, Simple Rules for Big Returns, a transformative guide designed to show you how ordinary investors become extraordinary when they learn the principles, habits, and thinking patterns that the smartest wealth builders use every day. You will discover that genius-level investing is not about complexity, but about clarity, discipline, and consistent execution. You will learn how great investors simplify decisions instead of complicating them. You will understand why genius-level results come from mastering a handful of rules rather than chasing trends or hype. You will uncover why the most successful investors rely on patience and steady growth instead of emotional reactions. You will see how intelligent investors avoid impulsive decisions and instead build strong, repeatable systems. You will gain insights into how smart investors evaluate opportunities logically rather than emotionally. You will discover the power of thinking slowly, analyzing carefully, and acting confidently. You will learn the rules that turn financial chaos into financial clarity. You will see why genius investors trust time, trust discipline, and trust compounding. You will rise into a new level of confidence as you learn how simple strategies can produce extraordinary long-term results. You will embrace a mindset where your money works smarter, not harder. You will understand how genius-level investing is accessible to anyone willing to follow the right rules. You will start seeing your financial life as a game of strategy, patience, and intelligent decision-making. And before we begin this powerful investment journey, make sure you subscribe to FREMA Audiobooks, like this video, comment your financial goals, and share this audiobook with someone who wants smarter returns with simpler rules. Because today, you begin your journey to investing like a genius. You begin investing like a genius when you understand that the smartest investors focus on principles, not predictions, because principles remain reliable even when the markets don't. You grow in clarity when you follow rules instead of random guesses. You elevate your discipline when your decisions come from strategy rather than mood. You gain confidence when you rely on systems that work repeatedly. You rise in intelligence when you stop trying to predict the future. You elevate your wisdom when you focus on what you can control. You grow in capability when you learn which rules consistently produce results. You gain emotional strength when you understand that markets will always fluctuate. You rise in maturity when you follow timeless principles instead of trends. You elevate your long-term potential when you stop being distracted by short-term noise. You grow in resilience when you trust the process during uncertainty. You gain direction when your principles guide your decisions. You rise in power when you invest with consistency instead of chaos. You elevate your identity when you follow the rules that great investors follow. You win every day when principles protect your progress. You elevate your ability to invest like a genius when you master the art of patience, because the strongest returns come to those who understand that time multiplies wealth far more effectively than anxiety or rushing ever can. You grow in wisdom when you embrace long-term thinking. You elevate your confidence when you stop expecting instant results. You gain clarity when you let compounding unfold naturally. You rise in intelligence when you understand that patience is a financial weapon. You elevate your discipline when you avoid emotional decisions. You grow in future potential when you allow investments to mature. You gain strength when you resist pressure to chase quick gains. You rise in stability when you stop comparing your timeline to others. You elevate your sense of purpose when patience becomes your strategy. You grow in identity when long-term vision replaces short-term fear. You gain power when time becomes your silent partner. You rise in capability when you trust your long-term plan. You elevate your wealth when patience increases your returns. You win every day when patience supports compounding. You rise into genius-level investing when you simplify your strategy, because great investors understand that simplicity reduces emotional stress. improves execution, and produces consistent returns. You grow in clarity when your portfolio becomes easier to understand. You elevate your discipline when your decisions become simpler. You rise into genius-level investing when you simplify your strategy, because great investors understand that simplicity reduces emotional stress, improves execution, and produces consistent returns. You grow in clarity when your portfolio becomes easier to understand. You elevate your discipline when your decisions become simpler. You gain control when you remove unnecessary complications. You rise in confidence when your investment plan feels manageable. You elevate your stability when simplicity prevents panic. You grow in strength when your focus shifts to what matters most. You gain wisdom when you avoid complex systems that fail under pressure. You rise in capability when your strategy becomes repeatable. You elevate your emotional balance when fewer choices reduce stress. You grow in efficiency when simplicity improves consistency. You gain opportunity when a simple portfolio becomes easier to expand. You rise in power when clarity replaces confusion. You elevate your future when simplicity strengthens your long-term performance. You win every day when simple rules lead to big returns. You strengthen your genius investing mindset when you understand the difference between noise and information, because most of what you hear about the market is designed to provoke reactions, not improve your results. You grow in intelligence when you stop letting headlines shape your decisions. You elevate your emotional control when you ignore panic-driven news. You gain clarity when you focus on real data instead of dramatic stories. You rise in confidence when you stop chasing every rumor. You elevate your stability when you listen only to sources that teach, not frighten. You grow in judgment when you recognize the difference between facts and hype. You gain foresight when you understand the motives behind sensational content. You rise in power when you silence the noise around you. You elevate your identity when you think independently. You grow in insight when you examine information critically. You gain strength when your mind remains calm during market turbulence. You rise in discipline when you no longer react to every fluctuation. You elevate your future when information, not noise, guides your strategy. You win every day when clarity replaces confusion. You elevate your investing genius when you learn the rule of protecting your downside, because great investors know that avoiding big losses is more important than chasing big wins. You grow in stability when you prioritize preservation. You elevate your intelligence when you respect risk. You gain control when you avoid investments that jeopardize your progress. You rise in capability when you learn to judge risk before reward. You elevate your discipline when you avoid emotional gambles. You grow in confidence when safety becomes part of your strategy. You gain strength when your portfolio is built to survive market downturns. You rise in resilience when you prepare for uncertainty. You elevate your wisdom when discipline prevents catastrophic mistakes. You grow in foresight when you build a foundation that can withstand volatility. You gain opportunity when you protect your resources for future gains. You rise in maturity when you no longer chase hype. You elevate your future when your risk protection supports long-term growth. You win every day when downside protection becomes your genius advantage. You become a smarter investor when you understand that geniuses focus on process, not perfection, because consistent improvement always beats unrealistic expectations. You grow in discipline when you commit to refining your strategy one step at a time. You elevate your clarity when you stop chasing flawless execution. You gain resilience when mistakes become lessons instead of limitations. You rise in intelligence when you analyze your behavior rather than blaming the market. You elevate your patience when you accept that growth takes time. You grow in capability when you understand that small improvements compound into major results. You gain confidence when you see how process protects you from emotional decisions. You rise in stability when you stop expecting instant mastery. You elevate your maturity when you understand the value of steady progress. You grow in perspective when you focus on long-term development. You gain strength when your process guides your actions. You rise in self-awareness when you track your habits intentionally. You elevate your future when progress becomes your priority. You win every day when process strengthens your results. You elevate your investing intelligence when you learn the rule of consistent contributions. Because genius investors know that steady deposits outperform sporadic investing and emotional timing. You grow in financial power when you invest regularly. You elevate your discipline when consistency becomes automatic. You gain clarity when your contributions follow a predictable schedule. You rise in long-term strength when small investments accumulate over time. You elevate your confidence when routine replaces hesitation. You grow in capability when you allow automatic deposits to drive your progress. You gain emotional stability when consistency reduces stress. You rise in identity when you become someone who invests without delay. You elevate your endurance when steady contributions keep you invested through all conditions. You grow in momentum when your money builds quietly in the background. You gain future opportunity when your capital grows steadily. You rise in financial maturity when your habits reflect your goals. You elevate your future when consistency builds your wealth. You win every day when you contribute consistently toward long-term returns. You rise into genius investing when you understand the rule of avoiding emotional trading, because emotional decisions destroy wealth faster than market downturns. You grow in emotional intelligence when you identify your triggers. You elevate your discipline when you stop reacting to fear or greed. Gain clarity when logic replaces panic. You rise in maturity when you accept that markets fluctuate. You elevate your confidence when you stop trying to escape volatility. You grow in strength when you make decisions from reason instead of urgency. You gain control when you separate your feelings from your strategy. You rise in stability when emotional reactions no longer dictate your actions. You elevate your judgment when you think before you act. You grow in identity when you become a calm, composed investor. You gain foresight when you plan for downturns ahead of time. You rise in capability when emotional neutrality becomes your advantage. You elevate your future when emotion-free investing protects your returns. You win every day when your discipline overpowers your impulses. You strengthen your investing genius when you understand the rule that knowledge compounds. Because great investors become extraordinary through constant learning and expanding their financial awareness. You grow in intelligence when you study the market regularly. You elevate your confidence when understanding replaces uncertainty. You gain wisdom when learning becomes part of your identity. You rise in capability when every new insight improves your decisions. You elevate your perspective when you learn from experienced investors. You grow in clarity when you understand financial patterns deeply. You gain strength when you stay ahead of changes in the investing world. You rise in opportunity when knowledge reveals new possibilities. You elevate your discipline when you apply what you learn consistently. You grow in identity when you become a student of wealth. You gain momentum when your understanding multiplies over time. You rise in long-term potential when knowledge shapes your strategy. You elevate your future when constant learning drives your growth. You win every day when your knowledge compounds like your wealth. You elevate your ability to invest like a genius when you understand that genius-level results come from removing unnecessary decisions, because fewer choices reduce stress, increase consistency, and prevent emotional mistakes. You grow in clarity when you simplify your decision-making environment. You elevate your efficiency when you automate predictable choices. You gain stability when you avoid overwhelming yourself with options. You rise in discipline when you eliminate distractions. You elevate your calmness when fewer decisions reduce fatigue. You grow in productivity when you focus on what truly matters. You gain momentum when your strategy becomes streamlined. You rise in capability when your energy goes to high-value decisions. You elevate your organization when your investing process becomes clean and structured. You grow in identity when you think like someone who values simplicity. You gain strength when minimalism improves your execution. You rise in intelligence when simplicity clarifies your goals. You elevate your future when fewer decisions increase long-term consistency. You win every day when simplicity multiplies your results. You rise into genius-level investing when you embrace the rule that great investors think independently, because following the crowd leads to average results while thinking for yourself leads to extraordinary outcomes. You grow in clarity when you learn to question popular opinions. You elevate your intelligence when you rely on your own analysis. You gain strength when you stop making decisions based on other people's emotions. You rise in maturity when you understand that the masses are often wrong. You elevate your identity when you trust your research over public noise. You grow in emotional stability when the crowd's panic no longer influences you. You gain strategic advantage when you see opportunities others overlook. You rise in confidence when your decisions come from knowledge, not pressure. You elevate your discipline when you remain committed to your strategy. You grow in wisdom when you understand how herd mentality creates bubbles. You gain perspective when you separate truth from trends. You rise in capability when independent thinking becomes your default. You elevate your future when your mind becomes your strongest investment tool. You win every day when independence shapes your choices. You strengthen your genius-level mindset when you learn the rule of diversifying your investments, because great investors understand that spreading risk creates stability, consistency, and long-term confidence. You grow in resilience when no single investment controls your emotions. You elevate your stability when your portfolio can survive market changes. You gain clarity when you understand how different assets complement each other. You rise in discipline when you avoid concentrating all your money in one place. You elevate your intelligence when you balance growth and safety. You grow in opportunity when diversification exposes you to multiple sources of return. You gain confidence when your investments work together as a team. You rise in capability when risk becomes manageable. You elevate your peace of mind when your wealth is protected from sudden drops. You grow in security when no single outcome determines your future. You gain long-term advantage when diversification supports compounding. You rise in wisdom when you recognize the importance of balance. You elevate your identity when you operate like a strategic wealth builder. You win every day when diversification strengthens your foundation. You elevate your genius investing ability when you master the rule of ignoring short-term noise, because great investors understand that daily fluctuations mean nothing compared to long-term returns. You grow in emotional intelligence when you stop checking prices obsessively. You elevate your patience when you shift your focus to long-term trends. You gain clarity when you recognize that temporary declines are normal. You rise in discipline when you stop reacting to market headlines. You elevate your strength when you stay calm during volatility. You grow in long-term potential when short-term panic no longer derails your progress. You gain wisdom when you understand that noise is designed to manipulate emotions. You rise in capability when you ignore distractions that offer no value. You elevate your judgment when you focus on fundamentals. You grow in identity when you become a long-term thinker. You gain perspective when you understand that markets rise more often than they fall. You rise in strategy when noise loses its influence over you. You elevate your future when long-term thinking shapes your decisions. You win every day when the noise cannot move you. You grow into genius investing when you understand the rule of analyzing companies, not stock prices, because great investors focus on the strength of the business rather than the temporary behavior of the market. You grow in intelligence when you examine how companies make money. You elevate your confidence when you study business models deeply. You gain clarity when you understand what drives revenue and profit. You rise in capability when you focus on long-term fundamentals. You elevate your judgment when you evaluate leadership quality. You grow in strategic insight when you analyze competitive advantages. You gain wisdom when you observe industry trends. You rise in maturity when you prioritize company strength over price volatility. You elevate your decision-making when you invest in businesses, not hype. You grow in identity when you think like a business owner. You gain opportunity when your research reveals undervalued companies. You rise in competence when analysis becomes your superpower. You elevate your future when strong companies anchor your portfolio. You win every day when fundamentals drive your success. You elevate your investment genius when you understand that big returns come from small, smart choices consistently repeated over time. Because genius-level wealth is built through persistent discipline, not sudden breakthroughs. You grow in power when your habits become predictable. You elevate your momentum when regular actions strengthen your results. You gain clarity when your path becomes simple and structured. You rise in discipline when you repeat the investing behaviors that work. You elevate your emotional strength when consistency replaces impulse. You grow in long-term success when you master the basics. You gain confidence when you trust your daily actions. You rise in identity when your habits reflect genius-level commitment. You elevate your future when your routine becomes unstoppable. You grow in psychological power when consistency becomes easy. You gain advantage when repetition compounds your results. You rise in capability when steady actions build exponential growth. You elevate your life when your investing rhythm becomes automatic. You win every day when small actions create big returns. You elevate your investing mastery when you understand the genius rule of staying invested. Because long-term exposure to the market outperforms constant buying, selling, and second-guessing. You grow in confidence when you recognize that time in the market beats timing the market. You elevate your emotional strength when you stop panicking during dips. You gain clarity when you realize how consistently markets rise over decades. You rise in discipline when you stay committed through fluctuations. You elevate your resilience when downturns stop scaring you. You grow in opportunity when you give your investments room to compound. You gain perspective when you see how short-term volatility leads to long-term growth. You rise in intelligence when you stop abandoning your strategy. You elevate your stability when staying invested becomes your foundation. You grow in identity when you invest like someone who understands wealth cycles. You gain maturity when you stop chasing temporary highs. You rise in capability when you understand that patience builds fortune. You elevate your future when your consistency rewards you. You win every day when staying invested becomes your genius move. You rise into genius investing when you learn the rule of reducing fees and unnecessary costs. Because small charges accumulated over years can cripple even the strongest returns. You grow in clarity when you understand how fees subtract from your compounding. You elevate your intelligence when you prioritize low-cost funds and platforms. You gain control when you eliminate financial waste. You rise in efficiency when your returns are not eaten by hidden expenses. You elevate your discipline when you evaluate all costs before investing. You grow in confidence when you protect your money from silent drains. You gain awareness when you realize how dramatically fees reduce long-term returns. You rise in capability when you use cost-effective investment options. You elevate your strategy when you maximize net gains instead of gross returns. You grow in foresight when you select investments that support your future, not your brokers. You gain strength when you become intentional with every cost you accept. You rise in identity when you think like a strategic wealth builder. You elevate your future when cost efficiency strengthens your compounding. You win every day when low fees increase your returns. You strengthen your genius mindset when you embrace the rule of sticking to your investment plan. Because the smartest investors know that discipline produces results long after excitement fades. You grow in focus when your strategy becomes your anchor. You elevate your emotional control when you ignore temporary distractions. You gain clarity when you follow your roadmap with commitment. You rise in capability when your discipline guides your decisions. You elevate your financial maturity when you trust your long-term process. You grow in inner power when you refuse to adjust your plan impulsively. You gain confidence when your plan carries you through uncertainty. You rise in consistency when you stop derailing your progress with spontaneous moves. You elevate your judgment when every adjustment serves a purpose. You grow in stability when your system remains reliable. You gain long-term strength when you protect your investing habits. You rise in identity when you operate like a strategic planner. You elevate your future when your discipline becomes unbreakable. You win every day when you follow your plan consistently. You elevate your genius investing ability when you understand the rule of compounding your gains, because reusing your profits to build more wealth accelerates your financial growth faster than any other strategy. You grow in intelligence when you reinvest your earnings. You elevate your momentum when your profits generate additional returns. You gain clarity when you see your wealth multiply naturally. You rise in capability when you understand how exponential growth works. You elevate your patience when you commit to long-term compounding. You grow in power when every gain builds on the last. You gain consistency when compounding strengthens your stability. You rise in identity when you become someone who allows money to grow uninterrupted. You elevate your discipline when you avoid withdrawing too early. You grow in wisdom when you understand how compounding turns small actions into big wealth. You gain advantage when compounding outperforms emotional investing. You rise in future potential when your contributions and gains work together. You elevate your destiny when compounding becomes the engine behind your wealth. You win every day when your gains grow your gains. You rise into genius-level investing when you master the rule of buying quality assets, because strong investments outperform weak ones, no matter what the economy is doing. You grow in intelligence when you learn to distinguish strong companies from weak ones. You elevate your strategy when you focus on fundamentals instead of hype. You gain confidence when you invest in assets with proven stability. You rise in capability when you choose investments backed by strong earnings. You elevate your resilience when quality protects you during downturns. You grow in perspective when you value strength over cheapness. You gain emotional peace when quality reduces uncertainty. You rise in judgment when you prioritize long-term winners. You elevate your identity when you think like someone building lasting wealth. You grow in financial confidence when quality becomes your standard. You gain opportunity when strong assets compound efficiently. You rise in future security when your portfolio is built on reliable foundations. You elevate your long-term success when quality supports growth. You win every day when quality fuels your returns. You elevate your genius investing power when you embrace the rule that great investors stay focused on what truly matters, because distractions weaken your judgment while clarity strengthens your returns. You grow in discipline when you filter out irrelevant information. You elevate your intelligence when you direct your attention toward meaningful data. You gain stability when you ignore speculation and hype. You rise in capability when your focus is guided by long-term thinking. You elevate your strategy when clarity sharpens your decisions. You grow in confidence when your attention supports your goals. You gain emotional strength when you stop reacting to every market shift. You rise in maturity when your focus remains steady during noise. You elevate your efficiency when you focus on high-impact actions. You grow in power when you concentrate on fundamentals instead of excitement. You gain opportunity when your mind is free from distractions. You rise in identity when you think like a patient, intentional investor. You elevate your future when focus becomes your advantage. You win every day when clarity guides your investing. You strengthen your investment intelligence when you understand the rule of evaluating risk before reward, because genius investors always protect their financial foundation before seeking growth. You grow in wisdom when you consider downside possibilities first. You elevate your judgment when caution shapes your decisions. You gain stability when you avoid unnecessary risks. You rise in intelligence when you assess the real cost of losses. You elevate your foresight when you identify potential weaknesses early. You grow in discipline when you stop chasing dangerous opportunities. You gain clarity when you choose investments that reflect your risk tolerance. You rise in confidence when your portfolio feels safe and strategic. You elevate your patience when you wait for the right opportunities. You grow in emotional balance when fear loses its influence. You gain maturity when you prioritize preservation over excitement. You rise in capability when your risk assessments become accurate. You elevate your future when protection supports long-term growth. You win every day when risk evaluation becomes your genius rule. You rise into genius-level consistency when you embrace the rule of reviewing your portfolio with intention. Because great investors understand that awareness creates improvement, while overreaction creates chaos. You grow in understanding when you track your performance thoughtfully. You elevate your clarity when you identify what is working. You gain perspective when you recognize areas that need refinement. You rise in confidence when your review process strengthens your decisions. You elevate your discipline when reviews become regular and structured. You grow in awareness when you assess your progress based on long-term goals. You gain maturity when you avoid emotional updates. You rise in capability when your reviews focus on logic, not panic. You elevate your financial intelligence when you learn from each cycle. You grow in resilience when reviews prevent mistakes from repeating. You gain direction when your adjustments support your overall strategy. You rise in identity when you become someone who evaluates strategically. You elevate your future when reviews sustain your momentum. You win every day when reflection improves your results. You elevate your genius investing approach when you understand the rule of aligning your investments with your personal goals. Because the smartest investors know that strategy becomes powerful only when it moves you toward your desired life. You grow in clarity when you define your financial destination. You elevate your motivation when your investments support your dreams. You gain direction when your portfolio has purpose. You rise in discipline when your goals shape your actions. You elevate your confidence when your investment choices align with your values. You grow in emotional strength when your goals become your anchor. You gain capability when your investments are designed with intention. You rise in identity when your portfolio reflects who you want to become. You elevate your consistency when you stay committed to your personal roadmap. You grow in foresight when your goals help you plan decades ahead. You gain stability when purpose keeps you focused. You rise in strategy when your investments are tied to meaningful outcomes. You elevate your future when every dollar pushes you closer to your vision. You win every day when your goals direct your wealth. You rise into genius-level investing when you master the rule of letting your system work without interference. Because constant tinkering destroys progress while disciplined patience multiplies returns. You grow in emotional control when you stop micromanaging your portfolio. You elevate your stability when you trust your long-term plan. You gain clarity when you avoid impulsive changes. You rise in maturity when you accept that markets need time to reward you. You elevate your foresight when you understand how long-term strategies unfold. You grow in confidence when your system produces steady growth. You gain consistency when you stop questioning every fluctuation. You rise in intelligence when you rely on your predetermined rules. You elevate your patience when you stay committed during slow seasons. You grow in identity when you operate like a calm, strategic thinker. You gain strength when discipline replaces impatience. You rise in opportunity when time amplifies your results. You elevate your future when your system works uninterrupted. You win every day when discipline protects your wealth. You elevate your investing brilliance when you master the rule of thinking in probabilities rather than certainties. Because genius investors understand that nothing in the market is guaranteed, but everything has a likelihood. You grow in clarity when you evaluate outcomes based on statistical reasoning. You elevate your wisdom when you stop expecting perfect predictions. You gain emotional balance when probabilities replace unrealistic expectations. You rise in discipline when you choose the most favorable scenarios. You elevate your decision-making when you focus on expected outcomes instead of fantasies. You grow in maturity when you recognize that even good decisions can have bad short-term results. You gain strength when you detach your self-worth from temporary performance. You rise in intelligence when you think like a strategist instead of a gambler. You elevate your resilience when uncertainty no longer shakes you. You grow in capability when you judge opportunities through logical frameworks. You gain foresight when you combine data with long-term probability. You rise in identity when you see yourself as an investor, not a predictor. You elevate your future when probability thinking guides your moves. You win every day when rational expectations shape your strategy. You strengthen your genius-level investing when you understand the rule of avoiding unnecessary complexity, because complicated systems fail under pressure, while simple systems thrive in any condition. You grow in discipline when you keep your portfolio clean and understandable. You elevate your confidence when your strategy becomes easy to execute. You gain clarity when you avoid investments you can't explain. You rise in intelligence when simplicity protects you from confusion. You elevate your calmness when complexity no longer overwhelms you. You grow in focus when you avoid clutter that distracts your judgment. You gain emotional stability when you simplify decision-making. You rise in identity when you think like someone who values efficiency. You elevate your capability when simple strategies lead to repeatable success. You grow in foresight when simplicity improves long-term performance. You gain opportunity when a clear plan creates room for expansion. You rise in maturity when you understand how complexity hides risk. You elevate your future when simplicity strengthens your growth. You win every day when streamlined strategies maximize your returns. You rise into investing genius when you master the rule of controlling your environment, because great investors understand that your surroundings influence your decisions more than you realize. You grow in awareness when you remove voices that promote fear or hype. You elevate your discipline when you surround yourself with responsible thinkers. You gain clarity when you limit exposure to chaotic financial chatter. You rise in emotional strength when your environment supports calm decision-making. You elevate your mindset when you follow guidance from credible mentors. You grow in identity when you align yourself with long-term thinkers. You gain direction when your environment teaches you discipline. You rise in productivity when your surroundings encourage focus. You elevate your judgment when you choose influences carefully. You grow in strategic confidence when your environment reinforces your goals. You gain maturity when you avoid settings that trigger emotional reactions. You rise in resilience when your environment strengthens your behavior. You elevate your future when your surroundings support genius-level investing. You win every day when environment shapes your excellence. You elevate your genius investing ability when you follow the rule of using systems instead of moods, because systems operate with consistency while emotions change daily. You grow in intelligence when your system dictates your actions instead of impulses. You elevate your stability when routines protect you from emotional swings. You gain confidence when your outcomes become predictable. You rise in long-term strength when your investing rhythm becomes automatic. You elevate your discipline when you allow structure to guide you. You grow in emotional control when systems replace improvisation. You gain capability when your investing process becomes reliable. You rise in identity when you operate like a disciplined strategist. You elevate your decision-making when systems eliminate chaotic behavior. You grow in foresight when your plans account for uncertainty. You gain strength when your system remains steady during volatility. You rise in clarity when your actions follow a repeatable sequence. You elevate your future when your system builds wealth consistently. You win every day when your system leads you to genius-level results. You strengthen your genius-level path when you embrace the rule of thinking decades ahead, because long-term vision gives you an advantage that emotional traders can never match. You grow in maturity when you stop focusing on temporary fluctuations. You elevate your intelligence when you project outcomes far into the future. You gain long-term clarity when you understand how compounding transforms small contributions. You rise in patience when you build a financial life meant to last. You elevate your discipline when decade thinking reduces fear. You grow in emotional stability when short-term noise becomes irrelevant. You gain opportunity when you allow time to magnify your gains. You rise in power when long-term vision protects you from panic. You elevate your strategy when your plans stay aligned with your highest goals. You grow in resilience when your mindset is built for longevity. You gain identity when you think like a future-oriented wealth builder. You rise in wisdom when you understand how much time influences returns. You elevate your destiny when decade thinking guides your actions. You win every day when long-term vision strengthens your genius investing path. You elevate your genius-level investing when you understand the rule of emotional neutrality, because the smartest investors do not get overly excited during market booms, nor fearful during downturns. You grow in emotional intelligence when you recognize that both euphoria and panic are dangerous extremes. You elevate your discipline when you refuse to act from emotional highs or lows. You gain clarity when you stay calm during unpredictable market changes. You rise in mental strength when your emotions stop dictating your financial choices. You elevate your long-term power when neutrality protects your consistency. You grow in stability when your decisions remain steady regardless of the environment. You gain resilience when emotions no longer control your behavior. You rise in confidence when you stay grounded while others overreact. You elevate your strategy when neutrality improves your judgment. You grow in wisdom when your emotions serve you instead of sabotage you. You gain maturity when you invest with logic instead of impulses. You rise in identity when you become known for calm leadership. You elevate your future when emotional neutrality guides your investing. You win every day when your mindset becomes unshakable. You rise into true investing genius when you embrace the rule of thinking like an owner, because great investors do not just buy stocks, they buy pieces of businesses. You grow in perspective when you evaluate long-term growth rather than quick flips. You elevate your clarity when you ask how a business will perform in 10 years, not 10 days. You gain intelligence when you think about revenue, customers, and competitive advantage. You rise in patience when you treat your investments as long-term partnerships. You elevate your financial maturity when you stop obsessing over price swings. You grow in capability when you analyze companies as if you were running them. You gain confidence when you invest in businesses you understand. You rise in stability when ownership thinking reduces emotional panic. You elevate your discipline when you judge performance based on business health. You grow in foresight when you choose investments with sustainable value. You gain opportunity when owner thinking reveals hidden potential. You rise in identity when you behave like a long-term builder. You elevate your future when ownership mentality shapes your portfolio. You win every day when you think like a business owner. You elevate your investing brilliance when you accept the rule of learning from mistakes, because every investor, even the greatest, makes errors, but geniuses extract wisdom instead of shame. You grow in maturity when you review your errors honestly. You elevate your intelligence when you learn why a decision failed. You gain clarity when mistakes reveal blind spots. You rise in emotional resilience when failure no longer breaks you. You elevate your discipline when you prevent identical mistakes. You grow in strategy when your learning compounds into better decisions. You gain stability when you detach from guilt and focus on growth. You rise in capability when lessons sharpen your judgment. You elevate your wisdom when mistakes refine your instincts. You grow in confidence when you improve with each cycle. You gain perspective when you recognize that errors are part of mastery. You rise in identity when you treat mistakes as tuition for greatness. You elevate your future when lessons fuel your excellence. You win every day when learning transforms your mistakes into power. You strengthen your genius-level approach when you embrace the rule of protecting your mental space, because your mind is your most important financial tool and must be kept sharp, calm, and focused. You grow in clarity when you limit exposure to negativity. You elevate your confidence when you surround yourself with intelligent thinkers. You gain strength when your environment supports your long-term goals. You rise in discipline when you avoid people who drain your energy. You elevate your emotional stability when you manage mental distractions. You grow in capability when you protect your cognitive bandwidth. You gain foresight when your mind remains clear and strategic. You rise in intelligence when you filter what enters your mental world. You elevate your productivity when you avoid mental clutter. You grow in resilience when psychological strength supports your decisions. You gain stability when your mindset stays healthy and grounded. You rise in identity when strong mental habits define you. You elevate your future when mental clarity shapes your investing. You win every day when your mind remains your strongest advantage. You elevate your investing genius when you understand the rule of long-term discipline over short-term excitement, because wealth creation rewards consistency while hype destroys results. You grow in patience when you avoid chasing trends. You elevate your discipline when you build strategies meant to last decades. You gain clarity when you recognize that slow growth is often the strongest growth. You rise in emotional balance when excitement no longer blinds you. You elevate your foresight when you design plans that withstand time. You grow in identity when you adopt the mindset of a long-range thinker. You gain power when your habits reflect commitment instead of impulse. You rise in intelligence when you prioritize durability over thrill. You elevate your judgment when sustainability becomes your filter for choices. You grow in stability when your decisions align with the future you want. You gain resilience when you refuse to be rushed. You rise in maturity when discipline outperforms excitement. You elevate your destiny when long-term thinking guides your investments. You win every day when discipline becomes your path to big returns. You complete your journey toward investing like a genius when you realize that wealth is not built through luck or complex secrets, but through simple rules executed with extraordinary discipline. You rise into mastery when you trust long-term principles more than temporary trends. You elevate your confidence when you understand that big returns come from consistent decisions. You gain clarity when you stop trying to predict the market and instead learn to navigate it wisely. You rise in emotional strength when patience replaces panic. You elevate your intelligence when you value knowledge over noise. You grow in power when simplicity becomes your winning strategy. You gain resilience when you stay committed through all market conditions. You rise in maturity when you think decades ahead instead of days ahead. You elevate your identity when you adopt the habits of the smartest investors. You grow in opportunity when your system works even when you're not watching. You gain momentum when compounding rewards your discipline. You rise in wisdom when you recognize that genius investing is a mindset, not a mystery. You elevate your future when your decisions reflect vision instead of emotion. And as you continue sharpening your investing genius, make sure you subscribe to FREMA audiobooks, like this video, comment your biggest breakthrough, and share this with someone who wants smarter returns, because your journey to big, intelligent, disciplined wealth begins right now.